Welcome to Connecting with Your Inner Hero. If you found your way here, you might be seeking community of individuals who face trauma and are ready to find a safe place to learn, grow, and move from surviving to thriving. We're your hosts. I'm Lisa Johnson, Certified Holistic Health Practitioner, joined by Christina Lipari, Certified Life and Health Coach. Welcome back to part 2 of The Power of Forgiveness. I'm Lisa.
I'm Christina.
In our last episode, we discussed the importance of self-forgiveness. In this episode, we will continue our conversation on how forgiveness impacts relationships and offer practical steps listeners can use on their forgiveness journey. So let's dive right in.
It's interesting the experiences that we've both have gone through. And obviously, you and I are still learning so much about each other. And we decided to do this podcast together because of the stories that we have shared with each other. This podcast and the podcast that will come, just learning more about each other. There's so many similarities. It's interesting to me because we both have had different trauma, but we both have had the same mindset when it comes to how we felt and the healing process and looking to God for forgiveness. And I think that's why this podcast is going to be so amazing for our listeners, because if you and I have gone through complete different traumatic experiences, but still have those same emotions and same thoughts and
the same patterns and familiarity and all of that, it goes to show me that I'm not the only one out there. And that what I've learned I've gone through so much education about trauma, what it does to the brain, how the brain develops as a result of it, how your nervous system develops as a result of it. And it also points to the fact that there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. And these things are true, and these things did happen. And as a result, there are thoughts, ideas, and feelings that happen. And then there's also a spiritual dynamic that happens. And once you have all that realization, then it makes it a little bit easier to be vulnerable and to share, because you realize, oh, wait, I feel like I'm waking up from a dream cycle or something. And the world is shifted and it's changed, but in a better way in most respects, because now I realize I'm not an alien in this world.
There's nothing wrong with me. And that's the words that you said. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. We've just been through trauma. And I agree. It's like, again, just those experiences and the words that you utilize to explain how you felt and the emotion. We all feel that way, and it's what we do with it and how we forgive ourselves and how we decide to move on. But at the same time, also bringing in a higher power, regardless of what you believe in, finding some type of spiritual growth. Because I believe that spiritual growth will help bring in and help build a community around you so you don't feel so alone.
Yes.
And so I think that's a huge aspect of just the spiritual perspective of what forgiveness looks like. And so I want to piggyback that to you, because I know we, talked about that a little bit, and you had some insight about what you thought about that.
Yeah. What's interesting is you're talking about spirituality. There are spiritual rules that exist, irrespective of whether or not we believe in them. I mean, think about the fact that gravity exists. Like, you could say, oh, you know what? Gravity doesn't exist. But yet, what goes up must come down, right? Our feet are on the floor when we are walking. We're not just floating around. Gravity, physics, the stars in the sky, all of these things clearly exist. But spiritual principles exist as well. Just because we can't see them doesn't mean that they're not tangibly affecting our lives. So when you're walking around with unforgiveness, there are different levels of spiritual things that will happen, whether it be spirits, if you believe in spirits, or whether it just be things that root down into your heart. So unforgiveness is the very first stage. And then what will happen from there, if you choose not to forgive yourself or to forgive other people, it starts to devolve, essentially. Bitterness is the next stage. Bitterness corrodes your soul. It will color every single thing that you see in your life. You become cynical, just poisons your body. Then actually what will happen is you have resentment. I don't like them. I'll never forgive them. I'm just going to hold on to that. I'm just going to let this ugliness that's just inside of me just keep turning around and around and around. And then you start to get into retaliation. Like you want to get even with them, right? Then anger. You've got anger, you've got wrath, you're not seen, you're not heard, you're just walking around mad, you're expecting that things are going to happen. And when the slightest little thing happens to you, boom, you're blowing up, right? The lid's off, you're freaking out on people. Another thing that roots in would be hatred. You don't want this other person to have anything. They don't deserve anything. They don't even deserve life. And these are things that you're walking around with. And you can start to tease them out and separate them out, but you can see how they're connected to this unforgiveness. Violence. Violence is another one. Your petty actions and your petty behavior. Sometimes you get so mad at people. Like you hear about people with their breakup stories all the time where they've gone and they've destroyed somebody else's physical items. They've keyed their car. They get into domestic violence, just all that kind of stuff, right? Murder. And I'm not even talking about going over and, actually, offing somebody, but murder is like gossip. You could be out there just destroying somebody's reputation just because they did something to you and you're carrying unforgiveness. All these different things are the ways that you might end up acting out. Maybe you don't do all of them. Maybe you don't get to that end root of just bitterness. That's what the root is, though, is bitterness, and it all stems from that unforgiveness. So that is why it's so important for unforgiveness to be eliminated from our lives. Who wants to walk around with that big tangled mess towards this person, towards that person, towards myself? I don't want that inside of me. That's why unforgiveness is such a detrimental thing in our lives. And this is why forgiveness is so important, because it frees us. It frees us from having that mess inside of ourselves.
Agreed. Pain changes you. It truly affects your life, not necessarily for the good. That's why forgiveness is so important. But at the same time, it is a choice. If you don't know the who and the why, you will always justify your anger. You'll justify your attitude. You need to learn to forgive. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's not restoring a relationship. Doesn't mean you have to be friends or in love or talk to them on a daily basis. It just means that you decided to take action for yourself, forgive them, forgive yourself. But what it doesn't mean you have to trust them again.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you have to build any type of relationship with them. And I think that's what a lot of people forget, because I had a situation in my life where there was lying. We'll leave it at that. And it involved a relationship of mine. And I thought I can get through what the lie was about. And I gave it to God and I asked for forgiveness. And for some time, the relationship continued on. But what I realized is I could no longer trust that person. Even though I forgave that person for the actions and the lies that took place in the relationship, no matter how much I prayed and how much I loved the person, how much I did forgive them, I just knew I couldn't trust them. And that's when I realized forgiveness is one thing, trusting is another. And if you feel you can't trust that person any longer with your whole being, that's when you know it's time to let go and move on. Walk away from the relationship. Walk away from the pain and the hurt that you continue to allow yourself to feel, to experience on a day-to-day basis, because you feel that you have to forgive that person. And what that means is now you got to stay there. You don't have to stay in a relationship that you don't trust anymore.
Oh, fully. And sometimes there's relationships with people that you're not necessarily able to, or you don't actually have to walk away, but you can actually place them at a different level in your life also.
Boundaries, 100%.
And I think that's been a big part for me too, is sometimes letting go and letting them move on and go to their next place and just completely breaking that contact might be the place to go. And depending on what that relationship is in your life, you may just be able to do that easily, or you might need to get some support with that. And then sometimes there's other options. I used to talk to my daughter about concentric rings of relationship. Like you're here at the center, and then based upon your trust level of that person, what they've shown you, who they are in your life, they're either towards the outer ring or they're towards the inner ring. It doesn't have to be black and white. There are gray areas. Sometimes people move in and out of those circles. But it's like if I find out somebody's gossiping about me, they're going to go straight to that outside ring. Even if I can't break contact with them, say maybe they're a family member. Maybe they're somebody that you're going to see at gatherings and get-togethers. They can be on the outside circle of that ring without them coming in, without you calling them regularly and talking to them like you used to, right?
Not giving them mental space, correct.
And yeah, exactly. Not giving them that mental space, forgiving them. Hey, peace on you, peace on me. We're going to go our separate ways. And you're on the outside of my circle, but you're still in my orbit. Any type of relationship situation, you're going to just have to look at the person and who they are and what's going on, and realizing that people are just going to hurt us in life. And there's going to be people that are close to us, that remain close to us, that hurt us.
Agreed.
So forgiveness is a continuous thing.
Right. Lisa, and I think it's important for us to provide some steps for forgiveness for our listeners, because I know that's what helped me. And I believe that knowing how to set boundaries with individuals in your life that have hurt you is so key. I also believe that journaling, at least for me, and I know you and I have talked about this, journaling has been such a huge factor for me to be able to release my cycling brain. I overthink and will cycle on thoughts consistently because that's how I'm hurting myself. And what I learned from going to counseling at 19 years old is get it on paper. If you haven't journaled before, get a piece of paper out and start journaling your thoughts, especially if you start cycling. If you've got anxiety and you're hurt, you've got overwhelming emotions, take a piece of paper out and just start writing everything down. I think a lot of people don't journal because they're afraid of somebody finding what they've written down.
Absolutely. And they feel like they have to keep it. Like you don't have to keep it. That's the whole point, is you're trying to get it out, so you're not keeping it, right?
Yeah. One tool that we will provide in our notes is a journal for individuals that might not know how to journal, be able to give you some guidelines and steps just to help you release. Because again, I think setting boundaries and journaling are the two things that really helped me. I don't know. What would you say, Lisa? What are a few steps that you would provide to the listeners to be able to move forward with their forgiveness and just be able to release the hurt and pain that they feel inside?
Sometimes I felt that the pain that I was carrying, like I felt I didn't deserve to feel that pain in some ways, from a perspective of, you try to talk about things with people and they say, that shouldn't have hurt your feelings, or you just need to toughen up, or
that drives me crazy,
whatever. And I found that what I needed to do was figure out who I was and what my values were. What are the things that are important to me? And then I could self-validate, because I would say that hurt my feelings because it didn't align with something that I valued about myself. And it's okay to do that, to self-validate. You don't even have to tell people that you're doing this.
One of the things that you didn't say is when people say, just get over it.
Oh my gosh. Just get over it. You're too sensitive. You think too much. You feel too much. You are too much, but you're also not enough at the same time.
That happened to you when you were a kid. Really? You're 40 something now.
Get over it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Generational trauma.
So I think one of the things is once we start to self-validate, knowing that our value is on a vertical plane, right? Like our value, it comes from God. Our gifts, they come from God. They are things that are innately given to us. They are gifts. They're nothing that we have to strive for. And then we have that value, and then we have our values. I value truth. I value integrity. I value celebration and feeling loved and all of these things. So understanding that, and then seeing, does this person align with that value? Are they treating me in alignment with that? That's that horizontal perspective. And that's where everything comes from outside. And when we can internally validate ourselves, give ourselves that self-compassion, and then we can work through forgiving, because now we understand, oh, okay, the reason I feel this way is because of this. And that's okay. So now I know maybe that person isn't for me. Maybe they need to go on this part of my concentric circles, whatever that looks like.
Agreed.
And we do also have a tool to help with understanding that for ourselves as well, that we'd love to share. Understanding also that person is functioning out of whatever space they are in their lives at that moment. I don't have to carry around their sin. They chose to behave that way. They chose to put it on me. And I don't have to carry that. That's their problem. That's their issue. Has nothing to do. So then again, I'm not letting them off the hook. I'm putting them on God's hook and knowing that they've got things that they need to deal with for themselves. So when I can switch that perspective around to, it's not actually a me problem. There's nothing wrong with me. It's their problem. Behavior. It's them problem.
Correct.
Obviously looking at something to say, did I have a responsibility in that? Doing that self-evaluation, not pushing it off and not taking responsibility. If I've got something I've got to apologize for and make up for, sure, I will do that.
Right.
Because I definitely want to keep my slate clean also. I don't want to be going around hurting other people out of the things that are happening in my own heart. So I understand there's a give and take in here. That doesn't mean that, again, that if there's relationships that you need to reconcile, great, reconcile them. If there are relationships that are just not reconcilable, that's okay too. Understanding that this is not black and white. Maybe it's not a practical step, but it's just a practical understanding. It's a mindset shift.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think truly the listeners who don't feel that they can do this on their own, because it's not easy. You and I have both had counseling to be able to learn the appropriate steps and the appropriate boundaries and how to build trust and how to move forward. And depending on the trauma, sometimes you can't do it by yourself. The other aspect of learning how to forgive and healing is get the help that you need, either through a counselor, talking to somebody at church, a life coach. Obviously, we're always going to recommend, if you're a believer, praying, listening to what God is saying to you, but truly getting the help is so important because you need to forgive yourself.
And there's so many ways out there, like you're talking about, to get that help. You're going to have to choose the thing that works for you. No, there's no magic formula, and not everybody is going to fit into the same parameters. The other thing too is exploring what works for you, learning how to listen to that inner man about what's right for you. If you feel like you're working with a therapist and they are working well with you and things are going well, please stick with that therapist. If you're working with a therapist and things aren't going well for you, find another therapist. If you're I did find that I was actually struggling in some of my communities that I was in that I had built up for myself. So I exited those communities, whether they were online or whether they were at church. And then I found other communities that were working well for me. So every single person is going to find the thing that works best for themselves.
I agree. Definitely. Thank you for listening today to the podcast of The Power of Forgiveness. We hope that through our exploration of forgiveness, you gained insights and inspiration to embark on your own path of forgiveness. And just remember, forgiveness is a process that requires patience, understanding, and self-compassion. By choosing forgiveness, we can liberate ourselves and create a more harmonious and compassionate world.
As we close out this episode, we hope you found valuable insights. We have more for you, though. Grab your free worksheet that goes along with the podcast episodes. The link is in the show notes.
Let us know in the comments what part of the episode resonated with you the most. Don't forget to follow and hit the notification bell to get updates on our newest episodes. Until then, be brighter and remember, healing is always within reach.